Picture this, an underground boxing ring where the air is thick with tension. Carter, riding high on a winning streak, is feeling invincible until Dalton enters the arena. The moment this mysterious fighter removes his hoodie, the atmosphere shifts. Carter's swagger evaporates as whispers about Dalton's reputation ripple through the crowd. It's supposed to be winner takes all, but Carter, suddenly very aware of his odds, decides discretion is the better part of valor and backs down. The prize money goes to Dalton, but not everyone's happy about it. One sore loser, fuming over his lost bet, makes the monumentally bad decision to stab Dalton, the kicker. Dalton barely flinches, standing there like some kind of indestructible force while his attacker realizes he's made a terrible mistake. As Dalton's tending to his wound, enter Frankie, a woman who recognizes something special in him. She owns a bar that's become a magnet for troublemakers, and the local police aren't exactly rushing to help. Her proposal? She wants Dalton as her head bouncer, offering an eye-popping $5,000 per week. That's a cool 20 grand monthly. But Dalton's hesitant. He's a man with no phone, no home, and a car that's more rust than roadworthy. Life's beaten him down so much that he finds himself contemplating the unthinkable at a railroad crossing. In a twist of fate, just as he changes his mind, his car stalls on the tracks. A train demolishes his vehicle, yet somehow Dalton walks away with barely a scratch. Standing there, watching his car in pieces, Dalton starts thinking maybe, just maybe, Frankie's offer might be the fresh start he needs. Sometimes the universe has a funny way of pointing you in the right direction. Dalton rolls into town, and his first stop? A quaint little bookstore where he meets Charlie and her dad, who point him toward his destination. Finally arriving at the Roadhouse, yeah, real creative name, Dalton barely gets through the door before Billy, the waiter, recognizes him. Turns out, our bouncer's got quite the reputation. The bar seems peaceful enough, so peaceful that Dalton actually comments on it. Laura, the barista, just smirks, knowing this calm is the definition of too good to last, and boy, is she right. That night, all hell breaks loose. We're talking full-on chaos, flying bottles, smashing glasses, even the band gets in on the action. But Dalton, he's as still as a statue, watching it all unfold. Quick interruption, folks. If you're loving this wild ride, don't just stand there like Dalton. Slam that like button and subscribe for more epic storytelling. Trust me, it only gets crazier from here. Back to the action. A biker gang roars in, and Laura's face says it all. Trouble just walked through the door. These guys start trashing the place like they own it, and that's when Dalton finally makes his move. Cool as ice, he strolls outside and starts messing with their bikes. Talk about getting their attention. Dalton gives them a chance to walk away, even cracks a few jokes about insurance and hospital distances. But when the fists start flying, he's like a human dance machine, dodging punches and taking down bikers left and right without breaking a sweat. The real kicker? After he's done, he borrows Frankie's car to drive these same guys to the hospital. At the hospital, we meet Ellie, a nurse with a sharp tongue who playfully calls Dalton a troublemaker. She notices he's bleeding and patches him up properly, his quick fix clearly not cutting it. When she asks if he ever actually wins these fights, Dalton drops this wisdom bomb. No one ever wins a fight. As Dalton's leaving, some new tough guys are already eyeing him up, itching for the next round of trouble. Back at the Roadhouse, Frankie hands over his pay and offers him a place to crash, her old boathouse, cleverly named The Boat. Oh, and there's a friendly neighborhood crocodile to keep him company, because why not, right? Dalton's night isn't exactly peaceful. In his dreams, he's back in the UFC ring as a challenger, the intensity building until Laura shows up with breakfast, snapping him back to reality. She fills him in on the Roadhouse's revolving door of bouncers, hoping Dalton might finally break the cycle. Later, at Charlie's bookstore, Dalton's just trying to use a computer, but the whole town's buzzing about his biker takedown. Suddenly, trouble erupts at a nearby store, more bikers causing chaos. Charlie, proving she's got serious guts, grabs a bat and faces them down. The bikers find this hilarious, until Dalton appears. Funny how quickly they remember their manners when he's around. As days pass, Dalton starts putting down roots, making connections in this quirky town. Meanwhile, out on the water, we meet Brandt, the biker boss, getting the world's most dangerous shave as his boat rocks on the waves. He's fuming because his intimidation tactics aren't working anymore, thanks to our favorite bouncer. The Roadhouse sees another brawl, this time over musical tastes of all things, but Dalton sees an opportunity for a teaching moment with Billy. When a knife comes out, create distance, he advises. Billy successfully breaks up the fight, and when things heat up again, Dalton steps in before letting Billy handle the cleanup. Talk about on-the-job training! Over the next few days, Dalton becomes a mentor to Billy, who soaks up the lessons like a sponge. He also spots something interesting. Reef, one of the workers, has telltale boxer's knuckles. In a stroke of genius, Dalton pairs up Billy and Reef as partners. Now he's got a tag team of peacekeepers, giving himself a much-needed breather. While escorting an overly enthusiastic patron out, Dalton spots those bikers again. They shoot him death glares and promise a comeback. How original. That night, Dalton's dreams are filled with his UFC days, when he was a different man, younger, brasher, always ready to throw down. Now he's learned the art of calculated restraint. Sometimes the toughest fights are the ones you choose not to have. Dawn breaks at the Roadhouse, and who should Dalton run into but Ellie? As they dance around their growing attraction, Dalton can't help but wonder why this town seems to run on pure adrenaline and attitude. Their friendly banter quickly turns flirtatious. Seems our bouncer might have found more than just a job in this town. After another week of keeping the peace, Dalton's heading to his boathouse with his pay when his instincts start screaming. A car's tailing him, and before he knows it, it's gunning straight for him. Dalton dodges the first hit like a pro, but the driver's not done. In a heart-stopping moment, the car reverses, sending both Dalton and a nearby truck flying off the bridge. Somehow, Dalton survives this attempt on his life, only to find Del, the biker gang leader, waiting at his boathouse with a gun. Bad move, Del. In a flash, Dalton flips the table, taking out Del's knees and introducing him to the local wildlife. Remember that crocodile Frankie mentioned? Turns out it wasn't just a scary bedtime story. Let's just say the croc doesn't go hungry that night. The next day, while police search for what's left of Del, locals just smirk. They know the crocodile's dining habits all too well. Meanwhile, at the bookstore, Charlie shows Dalton a map that sets off his internal alarm bells. Outside, he's confronted by one of Brandt's goons, demanding a meeting. Dalton, cool as ice, gives him a choice: keep his trigger finger or keep threatening him. The goon chooses poorly, and Dalton makes sure he won't be pulling any triggers anytime soon. Back at the Roadhouse, Dalton grills Frankie about the gang's obsession with the place. She plays it off as typical turf war nonsense, but something doesn't add up. Over at Brandt's place, things are unraveling. The fingerless messenger delivers the bad news, and Brandt's losing it. His master plan is crumbling, all because of one skinny bouncer. The cherry on top? His dad calls from prison, and Brandt's response? He chucks the phone out the window and orders his injured lackey to fetch it like a dog. Talk about daddy issues. While chaos unfolds in town, Knox is living it up somewhere else when his phone rings. It's Brandt's father calling from behind bars. The message? Clean up his son's mess. Knox, intrigued by the challenge, is ready to roll. Meanwhile, Ellie's got romance on her mind. She borrows her ex's boat to whisk Dalton away to her secret picnic spot in the middle of the sea. As they're chatting, Dalton drops Brandt's name and Ellie spills the tea. The Brandt family isn't just rich, they practically own the town. When she tries to dig into Dalton's past, he gets cagey, but Ellie's already done her homework and isn't scared off. Finally, Dalton lets his guard down a little, and sparks start flying. Enter Knox, making quite the entrance in his Ferrari, deliberately knocking over bikes at Brandt's place like he's playing dominoes. His first order of business? Complaining about the lack of sandwiches. Apparently, this guy's appetite is as big as his ego. When Brandt shows up, Knox greets him with a slap courtesy of dear old dad. But Brandt, nursing his bruised ego, manages to convince Knox to let him take one last shot at handling the Dalton situation. Just when Dalton thinks his day is winding down after his boat date, surprise, the police are waiting to invite him for a chat about Del's disappearance. At the station, the sheriff tries to intimidate Dalton into skipping town, but Dalton's smart mouth earns him a beatdown and a gun to his head. Talk about excessive force. The cavalry arrives in the form of Ellie, who storms in and, plot twist, slaps her own father, the sheriff. On the ride back, she fills in the blanks. Daddy Dearest used to be buddies with Brandt's father. But when the elder Brandt got shipped off to prison, the sheriff switched allegiance to Junior. Looks like keeping it in the family isn't always the best policy. While Dalton's dealing with the law, Brandt's stirring up trouble at the bookstore. Later, at the Roadhouse, the moment everyone's been waiting for finally arrives. Brandt shows up for a face-to-face with Dalton. But Brandt's done his homework. He's seen Dalton's dark past on YouTube, that infamous UFC fight where his opponent didn't get back up. Since threats and bribes won't work, Brandt plays his trump card, Knox. The Roadhouse erupts into chaos as Knox and his biker gang burst in like a hurricane. Knox, oozing arrogance, declares the place his territory and starts treating it like his personal playground, even snatching a woman right off her date. Billy and Reef, our dynamic duo of bouncers, try to step in, but Knox swats them aside like flies. Billy's out cold, and Reef? Well, let's just say he won't be bouncing anything for a while. Poor Dalton just wanted to enjoy his coffee, but now he's pulled into a full-scale bar brawl. Knox, who apparently traveled all this way just for our favorite bouncer, faces off against Dalton in a brutal showdown. Despite Dalton's skills, Knox's raw power and backup dancers give him the edge. The fight spills outside, leaving Dalton battered on the ground as Ellie and the cops show up fashionably late to a destroyed Roadhouse. Back at the boathouse, as Dalton's packing his bags, Frankie finally comes clean. This whole mess, it's about a fancy resort Brandt wants to build, with Frankie's property the last piece of his puzzle. When she admits she's terrified, more than Dalton could comprehend, it hits different. Just as Dalton's about to catch that bus out of town, fate throws him a curveball. Charlie's bookstore is up in flames, with Charlie and her dad rushed to the hospital. Suddenly, walking away isn't so simple anymore. Charlie was the first friendly face in this town, and now, well, let's just say Dalton's taking a detour from that bus stop straight to Brandt's doorstep. Dalton tracks down one of Brandt's henchmen and delivers a chilling message. He makes it clear that torching Charlie's bookstore was a terrible move. In a shocking turn, Dalton crushes the man's windpipe and tosses him into the pool. As the goon struggles to breathe, Dalton reveals his deepest fear. "I'm terrified of what I become when someone pushes me too far." The henchman's life slips away in the water. A nearby biker, witnessing Dalton's ruthlessness, quickly spills the beans about Brandt's upcoming cash-heavy meeting. Seizing the opportunity, Dalton hunts down a crooked cop and knocks him out cold. He discovers a fortune in cash, enough to set him up for life. In a clever move, Dalton frames the unconscious officer for murder before alerting the police and media. Just as Dalton finishes rigging explosives, Ellie's father shows up with alarming news. Brandt has kidnapped Ellie and threatens to kill her unless Dalton returns the money. Though skeptical, Dalton agrees to the exchange, unwilling to risk Ellie's life. Dalton slips past Ellie's ex-boyfriend cop in a boat, heading for the meeting point. Knox makes a flashy entrance at Brandt's estate, only to find it deserted. Meanwhile, on Brandt's boat, the sheriff lounges around, dismissing Ellie's kidnapping as fiction, until Brandt himself admits to it. "How's that for a plot twist?" Dalton quips. Brandt, seething with anger, demands his money back from Dalton. Suddenly, Knox appears on the horizon, giving Dalton the perfect distraction. He triggers the explosives, causing chaos and allowing him to search for Ellie. He finds her locked away just as the blast pressure blows open a window. The pair escape into the water, with Dalton fending off attackers. Ellie manages to climb into a boat, but to her horror, Brandt is already there. He takes her hostage once more, speeding off towards the Roadhouse with destruction on his mind. Knox and Dalton engage in a fierce battle on the water. With a clever maneuver, Dalton spins the boat, sending Knox flying off. Enraged, Brandt attempts to ram Dalton's vessel, but our hero leaps to safety at the last second. A struggle ensues between Ellie and Brandt as Dalton boards their boat. In a swift move, Dalton knocks Brandt down. The boat capsizes near the Roadhouse, but Dalton and Ellie manage to swim to safety. Brandt, however, survives the ordeal. Determined to end this once and for all, Dalton confronts Brandt. The villain tries to use a fishing spear, but Dalton quickly overpowers him. Just then, Knox reappears, ready for another round. This time, it's a fair fight, and what a fight it is. Dalton gives it his all, but Knox keeps landing solid hits. The intensity is off the charts. At one point, Dalton gets Knox in a headlock, but Knox retaliates by stabbing him in the gut. As Knox prepares to strike again, Brandt shouts at him to finish Dalton off. Irritated by the interruption, Knox turns his attention to Brandt. This brief distraction gives Dalton the chance he needs to recover. Using wooden sticks as weapons, Dalton mounts a comeback against Knox. In a final, decisive move, he takes Knox down for good. The sheriff arrives on the scene, telling Dalton he's in the clear but needs to leave immediately. Back at the Roadhouse, Frankie remains optimistic about its future. In the closing moments, Dalton's bus pulls up. As Charlie's dad discovers the case full of money and tries to thank him, Dalton has already vanished into the night.